오후 세션 첫 번째 순서로 이번 포럼에 화두를 던질 두 번째 기조연사를 만나볼 시간인데요. 싱가포르 국립대학교 벤넌 교수님께서 AI의 등장에 따른 사회 경제적 영향 및 향후 과제라는 주제로 발표를 진행해 주시겠습니다. 네, 지금 무대 아래에 자리하고 계시는데요. 큰 박수로 맞이해 보겠습니다.
Mr. In-Cho Kim, Vice President of KIET, Mr. Jae-Shik Shin, Deputy Director General, Ministry of Economics and Finance, right? Ladies and gentlemen, 안녕하세요. Welcome back from lunch. It's a great pleasure to be here in Seoul, in this beautiful city, and I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share with you some of my thoughts on the social economic impact of AI. Okay, some quick background. I run this center called the AI Center for Education Technologies in Singapore. It's a 5-year program that the government in Singapore invested in 2021. So the reason why we have this investment is because in 2020, COVID happened. So Singapore government, instead of just worrying about COVID, right, we decided that we want to invest. Okay, and the Singapore government decided to set aside up to 100 billion Singapore dollars, which is 100 trillion won, to invest in COVID. My center happened to be one of the investments that we made during that period. All right, and to prepare for this talk, I realized that I didn't know that much about Korea, but I did a lot of homework, and I went to Google and find out more. And I realized that recently in April, the president announced that they're going to invest 7 billion US dollars, which is 10 trillion won, right, in AI. This is what the government in Korea is doing. And even before that, I found out there's this report called the National Strategy for AI in Korea. This was actually in 2019. I read the report. I thought it was very impressive. Okay, and not just the government in Korea, but the Korean companies have recently announced that they are also going to invest 65 trillion won, right? So what I realized is that it's really scary to give a talk in Korea because you are at the forefront of AI and technology, and sometimes there's a bit of imposter syndrome. I don't know whether I'm the right person, but I try my best. Okay, and I really enjoyed the talk by Craig from Google this morning. Much of what he said was really impressive, and interestingly, I actually saw the demo that he showed, because a few weeks ago, Jeffrey Dean, who is the chief scientist for Google, was actually in Singapore, and he gave a talk, and he showed us the demo, right? So back to this topic today, what can we do about AI, and what should we do to respond to AI? So when I looked at this topic that was given to me, what it really means to me is how would AI shape society at large? Of course, this is a Korean audience, so I guess you worry about Korea. Now, this is a very scary thing, because what we are expecting me to do today is to try to predict the future, right? If I can predict the future, then I would have bought NVIDIA stock, and I won't be here today. I'll be some island vacationing now, right, instead of talking. So it's very, very difficult to predict the future, okay? And I'm going to try to say some things, and I could possibly be wrong, but bear with me, okay? And what I'll try to do is to talk about some stories of what I have seen, and from there, together, see if we can try to imagine what the future could be based on our past experiences, because it's very difficult to, just imagine things, right? So first, I'll talk about education, because I run the AI Center for Education in Singapore. So education is something that we have worked with for many years, and I'm familiar with, and education is a very, very important part of Asian society, right? Especially Korea, Singapore, China, Japan, right? And then I'll talk a bit about labor markets, how it's going to affect jobs, and then safety and AI regulations. And finally, we'll talk a bit about the futures, what challenges the future may hold with AI. All right. So, okay. So, first, just to get to know you a bit better. How many of you here use ChatGPT? 1, 2, okay. Wow, okay. That's a lot. That's like half of you. Okay, so what I did before I came was I went to ask ChatGPT, Okay? I asked ChatGPT, okay, how many users of ChatGPT are there in South Korea? I mean, anybody should know, ChatGPT should know, right? I mean, so we know that ChatGPT hallucinates, but if you ask ChatGPT how many people in Korea use, it turns out that number is about 3 million, which is only 6%. So this audience is, I guess, is not the normal audience. So half of you use ChatGPT, right? Okay, so let me just tell something that's happening in London. It turns out that just August, right, there is actually a news that came out, and I was quite surprised. There's a school in London that has decided that it would set up this teacherless AI classroom. It means they will completely get rid of teachers, right? So they feel that AI can replace teachers, okay? So this is what has happened, right, in London. Okay, and it turns out that there have been several more articles, okay, on this thing about whether AI should replace teachers, AIs can replace teachers. There's obviously a group of people that think AI can do it, but there are many people that don't think it's possible. Okay, let's do a quick poll. Who here thinks that AI will someday replace your teachers? Anyone? Hands up. 1, 2. Okay, who thinks that AI will not replace teachers? Come, let's do exercise after lunch, come. Will not, okay. Will replace. Will replace? Will replace? Will not replace. Okay, very good. So most of you don't believe that AI will replace teachers. Okay, it turns out that I'm in the same camp, but let me tell you something else. Okay, so 2020, there was COVID. COVID was bad, right? Okay, Singapore was quite fortunate. Singapore, our elementary schools, middle school, high schools, they only closed for a total of 6 weeks. When we were going through it, we didn't know how long it would close, but Singapore closed once, 6 weeks was over. The rest of the time, schools open. So Singapore was actually one of the very fortunate countries in the world where COVID didn't affect education that much. I was asking my Korean friends what happened in Korea, and they told me, oh, Korea, open, close, I think total about a few months worth of closures. Okay, so Korea is actually not so bad. I mean, there are many countries in the world where the schools closed for like 2 years, okay? So after COVID, right, what UNESCO did was it commissioned a report, okay, on the impact of educating technologies on COVID. Because during COVID, there were school closures. Most teachers were forced to teach online. Actually, even in Singapore, even though our local systems did not close, in the institutes of higher learning, like the universities, we actually taught online for 2 years. Right, so online teaching became very important, okay? And during this time, there were many edtech companies that came up. Okay, many did very well. They raised a lot of money. Because of this online teaching, there was this hype that education would change education, the technology would change education, and then everything would be better. But unfortunately, this is a report that UNESCO just came up with. It's called an edtech tragedy, okay? Basically, it wasn't very good, right? Because what UNESCO found out was that the vast majority of students all over the world, many of them, did not actually have access to the internet. Even if they had internet access, they may not have the devices to actually allow the students to actually get online, right? And more importantly, the teachers who were sort of forced to teach online were actually unprepared. They were never trained for this. Some had never used Zoom before. Most of us actually never used Zoom before, right? So they were actually not used to teaching online. And it turns out that teaching in the classroom is very, very different from teaching on the screen, okay? And what happened as a result was that the inequalities in many parts of the world widened. That means that the kids that were in rich areas, in rich schools, they had access. The kids that were actually in the not-so-rich schools did not have access. Now, this is actually very interesting because many places in the world had school closures. But you cannot just leave the kids alone at home, right? So one of the impact of these school closures and the kids having to stay at home is that the mothers, normally mothers, it turns out, had to stay home to take care of their kids. And so the labor participation of mothers actually declined during this period, okay? And the online teaching is not just about unpreparedness. School has a much more important role in life and society, And that is to provide our children with the opportunity to learn to interact with their peers, to make friends. That was actually also absent for 2 years, right? And then on the whole, when the kids are in the classroom, right, the teachers are able to see the kids physically. If there are any issues with the children, they can detect, right, and they can take care of the kids. But when you are teaching online, you are seeing a screen, and the child is just a little window, and sometimes the child is not even shown on video, right? You cannot really take care of these kids quite so well. Teachers also felt really sidelined because they felt that in many places, many administrators, many restrictions, they were just pushing out technology, and they didn't feel they were kind of like prepared, and they're still made to do online teaching, so they were really upset. Okay, and one of the things that happened also because of this whole period was that the mental health of the children declined quite significantly. Okay, so this is the story of COVID. What has it got to do with AI? Well, it turns out that the story of COVID and education in COVID is not very different from us asking ourselves, what's going to happen if we try to impose AI education? So here is technology, right? So AI is a form of technology, okay? And it turns out that, okay, this is just summarized for you. During COVID, even though there was supposedly a lot of education technology that's been applied to learning, the outcomes were bad. On average, learners were less engaged. They feel less, they achieved less. They felt they kind of were left out of the state provision education system. Okay, so the reason why I share this story is this. If during COVID, the use of technology did not help us improve education, what makes us think that just AI alone would actually help make education better? Okay, sure, there's Khan Amigo, there is all these people doing interesting, cool demos, right? But is that what education is about? Okay, and it turns out that one of the key results, at least in Singapore, I think Korea as well, is that because of COVID, because of the fact that many of our kids have to go online, we ensured that every single child has access to devices. So by 2022, for Singapore, I think all of our school children all have their own personal devices, right? But what we have also seen in research is that prolonged exposure to screen time, to kind of like online mobile phones is actually not helpful. In fact, right now, as we speak, this is July 2024, okay, we have parents complaining about, the kids bringing their laptops home. Instead of doing homework or schoolwork, they're playing games, okay? And they find it very hard to control the kids now because now every kid has the excuse to have their own devices. A random story, yeah? So I also happened to be in the Ministry of Education from 2014 to 2019. And one of the things I did was that I went for a visit to a school. And that time, we were already, in Singapore, experimenting with what's called one-on-one teaching. So in the classroom, we already give these students laptops. But this is not for the whole school system. It's just a few select schools. So I was in a classroom, okay, doing a classroom observation, and the teacher was actually trying to teach, okay? And all the kids have their laptops open. And it turns out there's this one child at the back, okay? That child was actually surfing the web instead of doing the activity that he was assigned. Then I went up to the child and asked, how is this interesting? He told me, yes, sir, very interesting. Okay, so even in 2015 or 2016, we already had kind of this trouble. The teachers had trouble trying to hold the children's attention in the classroom. Things haven't really changed, right? And today, with the massive proliferation of these devices, these problems have become more serious, okay? So, moral of the story is this. My view, I could be wrong, is that we don't get great teachers by throwing AI at the problem, right? So for all the claims that AI will make teaching better, you can personalize education, I'm not so sure that that's just really true, okay? But what it can do is this. We have done an experiment in India, right? So my center, we make software. One of the things that we built was a system that could automatically give feedback to students when they do programming assignments. So this was a lab that was held in IIT Kanpur in India, right? And generally, what happens is that the children, all the students in the lab, right? And you have a TA that goes around helping the students. So what we did for them was that we built a system whereby instead of the TAs giving feedback themselves, the AI system would first give a draft feedback. What the tutor would do is that the tutor would check the feedback, and then it would actually publish, right? So we tested this, okay? And we found that AI is not bad, right? GPT-4, we were using GPT-4 at that time, can do almost as well as the average human tutor, right? And some of the human tutors were really quite bad. Huh? So if we ensure that the AI always gives the first cut feedback, we can kind of eliminate the bad tutors. Yes, this sounds good. And you know from now, for now, that the current LLMs have a massive problem. And it's called hallucination. Just now you had Craig talking about grounding, about how they're trying to fix hallucination, right? So if you're thinking to yourself, okay, hallucination is there, what we can do is that we can put a human in the loop. So instead of having the AI generate the answer, giving the student, we generate the answer, have a human check, right? Well, it turns out that that doesn't really work also. Because we found that there were cases where the human tutor just happily clicked publish, even though the answer was wrong. Because what happens is this, as humans work with AI, right, and AI becomes more reliable, they will tend to think it's reliable and they will actually get complacent and just click. So it turns out that a human-in-the-loop system is also not necessarily the solution, okay? So my first kind of potentially contentious idea is this. I think AI will have impact on education. AI can improve education, and that's why I have a center that tries to apply AI education. But the process is not an easy process. It's not inventing technology, throwing it at a problem, and it will solve itself. So much so for all social problems. I think that education is one of the most important social issues that we have to address in Singapore, in Korea, everywhere. And in the same way that AI cannot just magically solve education, I don't think AI will magically solve any social problems, okay? So my take, and Singapore's take, is that even though with AI, we need to continue to invest in teacher training. Okay, so the goal is not so much to replace teachers, thank you very much for agreeing with me, but actually to see how we can use AI to build the next generation virtual Iron Man, right? To help the teachers become better. Okay, next, how will AI change the labor market? This is kind of interesting. And to answer this question, I also did a lot of research, okay? And to add to what Craig said this morning, it turns out that it's true that AI is not a new thing. AI has been around since 1950s. But the recent generative AI-like capabilities only was released in November 2022. So it's about 2 years, right? And things have been quite furious, okay? But it turns out that last year, in May 2023, and in June 2023, economists actually concluded what? That for all the fears of AI killing jobs, that hasn't happened, okay? And I'm not sure how it is in Korea. I couldn't find data on Korea. But in Singapore, the jobs have not been affected. So I was having lunch with the MD of Goldman Sachs in Singapore, and he said, I asked him, are you going to cut jobs because of AI? He said, no, we're not cutting jobs. What's really happening is this. In the past, all my people have like 50 things that they have to do that they cannot do because no time. Now, with AI, we expect them to work harder, work faster. So instead of 50 things, they have 20 things. Right? Okay, and then India has expressed some concerns about losing jobs. Okay, so the question is whether AI will change the labor market. The answer is clearly it will change the labor market, but the effects at this point don't seem to be very big, right? And we cannot really say for sure. At some point, we know that some jobs will be destroyed. For example, translation is really a problem that I think will be solved soon because the AI, the large language models are very good at translation, okay? And for copywriting has already been killed in some areas, but it's only niche areas, okay? And where some jobs are going to be lost, new jobs will be created. So this AI revolution is not a new thing. I mean, there's always been industrial revolutions every now and then, and new jobs have always been created. So we don't exactly know how it's going to change, okay? But what we do know is that the youth and the elderly will be vulnerable, okay? And then training and reskilling will be very important. Okay, so let me just take a pause and share with you something we do in Singapore. So this is AI Singapore, which is our national AI program. So the government invested money in 2017 to build this program. The Singapore government has announced another 100 billion investment in AI, which is 100 trillion won. Okay, Singapore is much smaller than Korea, so about 10 times smaller. So we invest a bit less, but still a lot of money. Now, so in AI Singapore, one of the things that we try to do is to help companies use AI, right? How do we do it? Okay, I think there's a panelist in the earlier session that said this. The adoption of AI and use of AI is less of a tech problem, less of an infrastructure problem, but it's really a people talent problem, right? He mentioned about Korea, not being able to attract foreigners, right? So we believe in Singapore that talent is the key, right? Singapore has money. We can just buy more hardware, buy more GPUs, but we don't think that's going to solve the problem. The question is people. How do we do it? And Singapore is a small population. Like Korea, our birth rates are low. The population is getting old. We're not having enough kids, right? So it's a real problem, okay? So what we did we have really tried, my school has expanded 4 times. Right, when I was young, now I'm old. When I was young, I used to have 200 students doing computer science. Now I have to deal with 900 students. Okay, I'm almost dying, right? So the local universities has increased our numbers, but still not enough. So one thing we did in AI Singapore, is that we also have a new AI apprenticeship program where we actually convert mid-career graduates, mid-career workers. So these are normally workers that are in other jobs. They have backgrounds in either engineering or sciences, okay? And we put them through a 9-month program to convert to do AI, okay? And it's very difficult to have a working adult who has kids and family to go training, right? So basically, the government will give them about 3,500 to 5,000, which is about 3 million to 5 million won a month, right, to be on training, okay? And they work on real-world problems. Question is, where are these problems going to come from, right? So it turns out that we also have a 100E program, okay, where the government gives companies a grant of up to 180,000, okay, and this is on a co-payment basis. That means that the government pays 70%, the company has paid 30%, right? And they come up with a program, and what we do is that we will assign these AI apprenticeships to one of these problems, okay? And after they finish the program, the 9 months. It's a 7-month program. The 9-month training is 2 months of training plus 7 months of working on the job, right? And then basically you have both kind of a minimum viable product and also people who are trained, right? So essentially we have integrated both the training as well as the job creation, okay? And after, if the project is successful, then the company would hopefully hire these apprentices, and then they will work in the companies, and there's a new job created, all right? And this is something that's quite important. One of the reasons why this program is successful, in my view, is that the selection criteria for the apprenticeship program is actually very stringent. So many people apply. I think only 10% of the people are actually accepted, okay? So this is something that works. Okay, now briefly on AI safety and regulation. So we know bias. Bias is a case whereby you ask a Midjourney to create like some kind of a picture of a rich person. You have this white people. You ask it to create a picture of a poor family. Or this black people, right? So the trouble with AI today is AI is mostly machine learning, which means that it's not algorithms per se, but depending on what data you put into the system, you have different results. Okay, so data unfortunately is inherently biased. So something that's very hard to check. Okay, and we need to figure out how to deal with this. And then ethical dilemmas. Okay, I won't go into this, like the trolley problem. If you have a self-driving car, you have one person in front of you, and then if you turn right, you see something else, another 3 persons, will you turn left or right or whatever, right? How does the machine decide? Privacy is a concern, right? When we actually use public services like ChatGPT, potentially our own personal data is going to these operators. How do we know what they're going to do, right? And then corporate issues. So even, the sound crack was good because Google has been quite clever. They have ensured the data is used, is kind of safe. But right now, the New York Times is suing OpenAI, okay? And you also have many artists suing Midjourney, right, for using their works as training data, okay? So this is actually a random thing I found online. Korea apparently has this system whereby it can actually predict crime, okay? It reminds me of this movie from Tom Cruise, right, Minority Report. Okay, but more seriously, okay, let me tell you a bit about crime. What do you think is the most common crime in Singapore? Anybody knows? Okay, let me tell you the good news. After COVID, crime rates fell. Means all the physical crimes, burglary, everything all fell. But guess what? We have become the online scam capital of the world, okay? For a small country, we have got 46,000 cases a year, and $650 million lost Sing dollars. There's 650 trillion won every year lost to scam. So much so that our police force has a new scam division, okay? And what is sad is this, this is a new report, just came out last month, okay? Now algorithms can clone your voice by having 3 seconds of your voice recording. So you pick up the phone and say, hello, are you there? Well, next thing you know, your mother, your wife is hearing from you, asking for money, okay? And so legislation needs to keep up, okay? And in fact, this is my Minister for Digital Development and Information, Josephine Teo. She was actually in Parliament, okay? Actually, this is a video that she showed in Parliament. And in this video, it was her speaking, but it's not her speaking. It's actually a deep fake. So in 1 hour, somebody who doesn't know AI can create a video of Josephine talking, all right? So we have legislation in Singapore to prevent deepfakes from being used in elections. I understand that we learned from Korea. Korea has it, okay? But beyond that, actually, the scams, we also passed legislation on scams so that we can actually work with the providers, the banks and the telcos. Okay, so harms cannot be prevented with legislation alone, right? Recently, you have this case of a woman suing Google because the son committed suicide, okay, from down the chatbot. And we know chatbots are very popular, okay? These are very popular. I Googled, there are many places on earth whereby virtual girlfriends are very popular, okay? So the whole problem, in addition to widening inequality, right, there's also this thing happening in the US as we speak, right? Okay, right now it seems that I just saw reports that Trump is currently in the lead. We'll see how that goes, right? So it's the future of work, okay? How should we work AI? Okay, and how will AI change society? All right, so one of the things that is really of concern to me is that the things we read today are no longer something that you choose. The algorithms are actually deciding what you will see, right? So these are called filter bubbles. So because of the impact of these kinds of algorithms, AI is just not about us using AI. The question is, how is AI affecting us? Okay, in terms of teaching, why is teaching hard? I've been prof for 18 years. So one of the challenges that I have seen is that teaching is getting harder. Why is it so? Because first, there was handphones. Mobile phones actually changed many things. The behaviors of students changed. Then there was social media, right? And then COVID happened. So all these events had an impact on the students, okay? And then in general, there's also wealth, parenting styles have changed, society now has changed, and most recently, you have your GPT. Right, so basically, our problem in Asia is what is called exam-centric kind of education system, okay? Which means that as long as the exams are there, the parents only care about exams, okay? And they fail to understand how learning works. So if you think of life and learning as a spectrum of skill, right, there is the beginner and the expert, okay? It turns out that GPT and the LMs are quite good already. So the fear is this. As our students focus too much on exams, the parents care too much about exams, they care about outcomes. But education is not about outcomes. Education is about a process. So what we can worry about is that there will be this curve in the future whereby there's a small number of students and people who are able to use AI very well, and they move far ahead in the curve. Then the rest of the people will become dependent on AI or GPT, right? And they get stuck on the left side. Okay, this thing I call the AI chasm of death. And this is the kind of worry that I have on our society, which is that it's not so much about what AI can do for us, but how AI will actually change the way that the society behaves. Okay, so education needs to change, okay? From in the past, exam-centric system, whereby people or the students are taught how to answer questions, okay, to do the things right. We need to change the new system where they learn to do the right things. Because it is much better for our students to do the right things not so well than to do the wrong things perfectly well. Okay? So adoption of AI, I want to put it down, is that it is not a tech problem. It's actually a people problem. Okay? How will AI change society? I don't really know. Okay? But I think moving forward, we need to make sure that we need to be people-centric. Okay? And then we need to make sure that no one is left behind. Let me just end with one small story. So I was having dinner with my friend 2 days ago. And then when I got out of the restaurant, and I'm about to go at the hotel, he got out on the road and he flagged down a taxi for me. You may think that that's very normal, right? And honestly, that was very normal in Singapore before COVID. If tomorrow or next year you visit Singapore, please don't try to flag down a taxi. You will never get a taxi in Singapore. Because today, without a handphone, you will never be able to get a taxi. There's no taxi that will stop for you, because every taxi going past is already going somewhere to pick up passenger. Okay, so this is the impact of AI or technology on a society. Right? So hopefully this story is something that we keep in mind. And as we move forward and deploy AI, let no one be left behind. 감사합니다.
네, 고맙습니다. 오후 첫 번째 세션의 기조 연설 함께 하셨습니다.